All right. So thanks everybody for joining us. This is our legislative team webinar. We're getting close to the end of the session, and so we wanted to give you guys an update and share the latest information with everybody, and aim to go ahead and get as much clean energy legislation done during this session as we possibly can. So Henrietta, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Carol. Hi, everybody. I don't know who is out there, but it's nice to be with you this evening. I'm Henrietta Davis, and I'm a member of the board of MCAN and the chair of the Legislative Action Committee. I'm going to tell you that this meeting is going to be about the goals that we have for this legislative session, the issue areas and the bills that we're pressing, and we hope to get some of your questions answered tonight too about those bills, about how to advocate for them, how to lobby, and what the content is. So I also want to take a moment to thank Mass Power Forward, which is the organization, the coalition that we're a part of in pressing for this action. Being part of a coalition means that there are lots of other people who are also out there and at the State House and making phone calls, working to get these bills passed. So as I said, I'm your speaker. I'm one of your speakers. I'm the member of the board, and I think you all know Carol Oldham, who's the executive director, our very able executive director and expert on this legislation. So she's going to, when we get to that, she'll be the one who's going to tell you what's in the legislation and probably be the best person to answer your question.
And sorry,
yeah.
This is Carol. I just wanted to break in because I realized I forgot to say two things right at the beginning. The first is that we'll do a moderated question and answer, so folks can go ahead and put their questions into the chat box throughout the webinar, and we'll gather those and answer them at the end. We prefer that folks don't try to answer each other's questions, although if somebody does know, we can go ahead and get that done at the end, but we just find that it distracts from the content while the webinar is going on. And then the other thing is, I think I mentioned this, but we will send you all of these materials, including, the script and everything like that afterwards. So sorry about that, Henrietta. Go ahead and take it away again.
Okay. Well, just I'm doing the background in MCAN, which I think you probably have on your screen now. It was founded in 2000, and we are a network of local organizations pressing for local action and climate action on the state front. MCAN gives you expertise to help make these groups function better, and so you don't have to do it all yourself. And as a result, we're a network of organizations, about 50 chapters across the state, advocating, and we work to make community level change and turn that into state and national level change. So our team, that's you guys, all of us together, working together to have a response at the State House. We think of ourselves as a rapid response team. That means that when we need you to make phone calls, you're ready to go, and that's why we're having this discussion tonight, so you can be ready when you get that that message, that email telling you that it's time to make phone calls. Now you see here that it says calls or visits when they're needed, and I know a lot of people think, well, why can't I just email? And it turns out that phone calls, even though you're calling into the staff of your legislator, or then the staff person's taking that information down, that's more effective than an email, believe it or not. And so I'm sure they get lots and lots of calls about the same kind of thing, but it's they register them more highly than if they were just getting emails. We also, we're not going to ask you to do much, but actually things are heating up now, so you might hear from us 2 or 3 times a month from now until the end of July. We also ask you to contact your local elected officials and get them to send support for these bills. either individually or collectively from your town to support the bills, but that's all very helpful. So as I said, we're getting you ready to make phone calls. Lots of bills, July 31st, when this is one of those things where it all comes together at the end, and there's a lot of activity. So I like this line that Carol put in here, let's get these bills over the finish line. So tonight we're going to talk about the top bills, we're going to talk about how to find your reps and senators, and we're going to talk about how to call them, what to say when you get somebody on the other end of the phone. These bills are, hello?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, no, it's you.
I'll keep on going. These bills are our top priorities. They're aligned with MCAN and the work that we do and what we've heard from you on the local level that's important to you. We like to be, the board and Carol and her staff like to be responsive to you, and so at the end of this legislative session, we're going to be asking you, what do you want MCAN to be supporting and working on and doing research on for the next legislative session? But first, let's get these bills passed. And we're hoping these will have big impact and that they're winnable. We don't like to go chasing after windmills. We want to make sure that we have real, true impact. I think this might be where you take over, Carol, and tell us what are these bills?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's yours.
All right. So thanks, Henrietta. And Henrietta's right. There's a lot of sort of, in the legislature, even though we have these year-and-a-half-long sessions, there's sort of this scramble at the end. So we're right at that, at the edge of that scramble point, of course. And so the top bills that we're really working to get over the finish line are the Solar for All bill, the Environmental Justice bill, the Renewable Portfolio Standard increase bill, and there are more than one of some of these. We're also working on carbon pricing, and then we're asking you guys to make calls about a couple bills that are mass power forward priorities, even though they're not top bills for MCAN. We're part of and you guys are part of this call-in effort through Mass Power Forward. So we're asking you while you're making these calls to go ahead and put these other two bills on your list. So we'll tell you all about all of these. So the Renewable Portfolio Standard is really focused on accelerating renewable energy. It's a law that's been around it's been in place since 2003, and it goes up right now by 1% a year. It says that all the utilities, all the investor-owned utilities have to get some of their electricity that they sell to you from truly renewable energy, and it goes up by 1% a year. Unfortunately, that's not really enough to get us where we need to be to fight the climate crisis. We really need to be, that gets us, to 45% by 2050 sort of thing, and that's really not enough. We really need it to be more like 3% a year. So the Class 1 renewables, just to make sure that folks know this is really good renewable energy. It's solar, it's wind, it's anaerobic digesters, so it's truly green energy. And there are a couple different bills, but the ones that we're supporting, we really want the legislature to increase the Renewable Portfolio Standard by 3% a year. And we would like to see municipal light plants comply with the Renewable Portfolio Standard as well. So these two bills, the Senate 1876 and the House 2100, are both called an act to increase the Renewable Portfolio Standard and ensure compliance with the Global Warming Solutions Act. And a couple of the solar bills actually also have the 3% in them. But the 3% increase actually gets us to 50% by 2030, and it gets us to 100% by 2050. I'm sure most of you guys on the phone know that scientists now agree that we really do need to cut our carbon emissions by 100% in order to stay under a 2-degree climate change and keep our world safe for our children and grandchildren. So the additional Renewable Portfolio Standard bills, you see the numbers here. what you'll see that what we say in the script is just a general talking point about increasing the renewable portfolio standard, because that's really the most important aspect. The second bill that we're focused on is solar for all. There was, as many folks know, there were some bad moves on solar during the last legislative session, and we're trying to get a bunch of that fixed. This is also about having equity in environmental justice and urban communities, giving them access to solar so that it's not just something for communities that are wealthy, that have a lot of homeowners. So the lead sponsors for this, you can see, are Representative Holmes and Dubois and Senator Chang Diaz. It basically tries to remove some of those specific barriers. So restoring net metering credit for low-income projects, community shared solar, that kind of thing. It lifts the net metering caps to 5%. They're currently stuck at 3%, and we're having to go back and beg all the time to the legislature. So trying to move the needle a little bit further so that we don't have to go quite as frequently. And it also mandates that the programs serve communities that, like I said, might have a lot of renters in them, might not be English as a first language communities, and might have more low-income families. So it tries to make things better and essentially spread solar around so that everybody's got access to solar energy. The environmental justice bill, this is actually a photo from one of the hearings that was in the State House. And this is Representative Dubois and Senator Eldridge's bill. And it essentially ensures that low-income and people of color communities are protected from environmental pollution and gives folks access to multilingual outreach and consultation by the government. It helps to set a standard for prevention of harm to these communities. So as folks know, a lot of projects that provide a lot of pollution are sited in communities that are low income or have a lot of people of color in them. And this bill tries to address that and tries to make sure that those communities have a voice prior to these projects being cited there. So we're also asking you to speak to your reps and senators about carbon pricing. And that's basically the idea of putting a price on the carbon that comes out of even places like your tailpipe or your furnace. And there are actually 39 nations that now have carbon pricing. And you can see that there have been several countries that have recently put carbon pricing into place. There are a bunch of bills. We think that it's a key tool in the toolbox. We are not picking a favorite child. As long as carbon pricing is implemented, we're happy. It basically provides a disincentive to burning fossil fuels and helps us meet the mandates of the Global Warming Solutions Act, which says that we need to cut our climate pollution 80% by 2050. And then it also helps us meet the needs of the roadmap that was set by the Massachusetts Clean Energy and Climate Plan for 2020. One of the things that folks may know is that the transportation emissions, so the power plant emissions have gone down because of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in Massachusetts and in the region. But unfortunately, a lot of the other pollution has either stayed steady or has in fact gone up, like transportation has gone up. So this helps to address that. So the additional bills that we're asking you to make calls about, these first two, we're asking you guys to call about the Global Warming Solutions Implementation Act and the Department of Public Utilities Reform Act. There's also, I'm just going to tell you guys about the environmental bond bill to make sure that you know, because I'm betting that folks would have questions if I didn't say something about it. So the Global Warming Solutions Implementation Act, which is actually called the Acting on Climate Change and Planning for It Act. So this is Representative Smizek and Senator Pacheco. basically we set a goal in 2008 that we would do a major cut by 2020 and an 80% cut by 2050, and we didn't set any intermediate goals of 2030 and 2040, and it's really hard to make that leap if you're not being forced to do some planning and some thinking in the meantime. So it requires the state to set some goals, and that way would force us to meet them. The Reforming the Department of Public Utilities bill, that's Representative Kulik and Senator Eldridge. You'll notice that Senator Eldridge's name is on a lot of good stuff. This basically is a bill that paves the way for the fight against new gas pipeline infrastructure. Right now, the process is not transparent, and decisions can be made behind closed doors. This provides a lot more transparency and protects electricity rate payers and actually protects conservation land and private landowner rights. So that's something I'm sure you guys have heard in some of the pipeline fights. The pipeline companies would do stuff like start cutting down trees before they had permission to build the pipeline. It keeps them from doing that kind of thing. And last but not least, the environmental bond bill. So this is something that you don't actually need to make calls about. It's a good thing. It has a lot of land conservation and climate adaptation, so it has like coastal buybacks and stuff like that. There was some energy language in there, including the clean peak standard and PACE, but those were actually taken out, and some environmental justice language was added. So something that you'll notice is that the environmental justice language is actually in multiple bills this year, which is a really good thing. Also, something that folks were concerned about was that there was some language about privatizing water in the environmental bond bill. That's also been taken out. So the good news is that it is now, the environmental bond bill is now just kind of a good thing. It's always been something that's been more focused on land conservation, and now this time it's also focused on climate adaptation. Folks may have heard about Senator Pacheco's omnibus bill. So it's only in the Senate. There's not a House equivalent. It basically is an everything and the kitchen sink of all energy and climate things. So it includes the renewable portfolio standard increase. It eliminates the net metering caps for solar and wind. It's got language about the solar for all equity piece. It's got the Department of Public Utilities reform. It has a lot of things in there. And it also has some stuff that's not in any of the other bills. So it's got battery storage. It talks about expediting offshore wind. So as folks know, there are some there's some land, or not land, I guess water, that's been leased way off our shores in federal waters. This helps to speed up those procurements because things keep getting bogged down at the state level, unfortunately. So it helps us get that really clean offshore wind power faster. Unfortunately, the House has said that they're not going to take up the Pacheco's omnibus bill. And what they've said is that they're not really going to do an omnibus bill. But the rumbling in the hallways says that they're going to end up doing something that has a couple different pieces to it, because it just doesn't make sense for them to do a bunch of different bills. So the House really is the wild card. Folks who've been talking to people at the State House, who've been lobbying on bills for multiple sessions, know this. The Senate is more progressive than the House. What we ask is that if you only have time for one phone call, let's say you've got 5 minutes in the next week that you can do a call in, please make it to your representative rather than your senator. We'd love for you to call your senator too, but the really urgent thing is to call the House. So the Transportation, Utilities, and Environment Committee may pass a handful of energy bills, which means that it would move over to the House. and we really feel very strongly that the House needs to act on energy issues this session. So, basically,
Carol, you want
you guys,
to
yeah, go ahead.
Plea here.
Yes, please.
So, it's my job to remind you all that that you, the constituents, are the most influential voices for the lawmakers. When you call into, especially to your own local representative or senator, it really matters to them. And they keep track of it, and they log it, and they know how many phone calls they're getting on which bills and on which issues. So it really matters to do it. And I guess if you're on this call, you know how critical that is and how important your action is. It helps to set the agenda for the future, but most of all, we're hoping it'll help to get these bills over the finish line. And it also demonstrates the urgency that there is and how the people are feeling. Your voice is very important, and if you can get other people to call too, so much the better. If your MCAN chapter is able to get others in the chapter to make phone calls and alert them, that would be terrific as well. So we really appreciate the work that you do. And we have here a script, and I think Carol's going to go through the script because she's had experience with this before. And Carol, why don't you take it from here?
Sure. So, like, for instance, so this is a script that we built so that you guys can, and actually what we did was that we took the Mass Power Forward script that they had made and just made a few adjustments. So this is something that you can use for calls to both the House and the Senate. So if it was me calling, I would say, hi, my name is Carol Oldham, and I live in Jamaica Plain. I'm a constituent of Rep. Sanchez's, and I'd like to ask that the representative speak to leadership about passing some important clean energy policies. And, you know, we've added this sentence, if you're calling the House, to say the House really needs to act on energy issues this session. They're, you know, as Henrietta pointed out, they're not really feeling the urgency quite yet. So you guys making the calls will really make the difference between them not feeling the urgency the way they do right now and really feeling it and feeling the need to act. So what we're suggesting is that you say that you support Senator Pacheco's bill, but then go on to say, these are the aspects that are really important to me. So we're going to send you this script in an email. And actually, I just realized it says 5 aspects, but there are 6 things. So you'll see that increasing the renewable portfolio standard to grow by 3% a year, implementing solar policies to help low-income communities, codifying environmental justice regulations, reforming the Department of Public Utilities, setting new emission standards for 2030 and 2040 under the GWSA, and carbon pricing. And this may sound like gobbledygook to you, but this is for these folks who live and breathe this. They're going to know the bills that you're talking about. We put bill numbers next to a couple of ones that we thought that there would be a chance that they wouldn't know what you were talking about. So that's that reforming the DPU and implementing solar policies, really the Solar for All bill. We have an optional last thing that you guys can, or next to last thing, I guess, that you guys can say. So we've been doing a lot of work here at MCAN with municipal light plants, and one of the things is that they serve about 15% of the electric load in Massachusetts and are not subject to the renewable portfolio standard or the clean energy standard. And so, and apparently legislators only hear from the light plant managers in those towns. They don't hear from folks like you who say, you know, I really want them to be subject to the same laws that I'm subject to. So we've got a paragraph that you can use if you want to mention that. And then it's always nice to give them your reason. You don't have to, but for instance, I might say I care about climate change and clean energy because I want to leave a better world for our children and grandchildren than what we have right now, and we can't do that unless we tackle climate change and unless Massachusetts shows leadership. So You can choose whatever your reason is. And we always ask that you thank the staffer for their time. They're super busy. They get a lot of calls. This may be one of their only calls that day on these issues, but there's been a lot going on at the State House, so it's always nice to thank them for their time and to be polite with them. And they're, 99% of the time, they're folks who are in their early 20s. This is, something they studied political science in school, and it's a nice opportunity to connect with the folks who actually live in the towns that they're serving. So that's the script, and again, I said earlier, but we'll send you the script in the email, and we'll correct that disagreement in the number of points. So we wanted to just show you guys, for those of you who are on the phone who don't know how to find your representative and your your representative and your senator, you can use this link here, and we'll go ahead and send that in the follow-up email to you. And if you look on the left, this Find My Legislator, so that's sort of what the initial screen looks like. We put in our office address, and then you can see on the right that our senator is Joseph Boncourt, and our representative is Aaron Miklowitz, who we were laughing because he looks like he's about 12. But he's representative, and what have I done with my life? So that's an easy way to find them, and then you can just click on each of their names to get their phone number for their office. So Henrietta, you're up. Are you there? Yeah, well.
I'm unmuting. Sorry.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay. So I want to thank you very much for joining the team and being part of the call, and for being willing to do this calling. I think once you do it, you get kind of into a role, and you'll all get good at it. We will be telling you after that about what the next steps are, but we'll keep you informed along the way about how to volunteer and how often we're going to contact you. And I think that Carol's actually, I mentioned earlier that the plan is to be in touch with you, as needed, but probably no more than 2 or 3 times a month over the course of the next, essentially, May, June, and July. And you should feed back to us if you're hearing from us too much or not enough. I mean, I suppose that could be possible too. So this slide is telling you where you can direct your questions. There's a fact sheet. This is the fact sheet you can look for.
Yeah.
And you're going to get this as an email. And if you know anybody else, or you yourself haven't yet signed up, although I guess I kind of assume if you're on this call, you're thinking you're signing up. But is there something more people need to do if they want to be somehow more official, Carol?
No, I would say, you can email us, obviously, at this email address here, and we'll send this, the slides and everything to you guys as well. And as Henrietta said, so we love feedback. We love to improve what we do. If you've got feedback about, let's say you call and I don't know, they say, we wish that you were talking about this bill, or, oh, that bill's dead, or, something like that. We'd love to hear about it. We want to make sure that we're giving everybody the best information. Also, we would love to hear from you when you make your call. And, because one thing that you can do if you're if you get a knowledgeable staffer, is that you can ask the staff person how the senator or representative is planning on voting, or if they're planning on talking to leadership about these issues, because that's always a super helpful thing for them to do. So nobody's asked any questions in the chat box, so maybe I should open up the line unmute everybody and see if we've got any questions. Let me see if I can manage to do that. All right. So everybody is unmuted, so please. Uh-oh. We've got a little feedback issue. So what I'm going to do, sorry everybody, it's that's a feedback thing that happens between people's phones and their laptops. And what ends up happening eventually is that we end up on an endless loop of that. People have probably been on conference calls where that has happened. But if folks want to go ahead and ask questions in the chat box, we've got plenty of time. This ended up going really fast. And so we'd be happy to answer questions as we are able. And so the chat box is, so up in your toolbar, there's a little thing that looks like a voice bubble. And that would be next to the little icon of people's heads. And so that would be where you would put the questions in. Wow, you all are a quiet bunch. So do folks feel comfortable? Do people want to put in the chat box whether they feel like they've got enough information to make calls? Oh, yeah. So Carol Harley asked, what are your thoughts on Governor Baker's proposed energy score for homes via real estate sales? So I think for the most part, it's a very good bill. There's a little bit of language in there that is concerning. So this is something, for folks who don't know about this, this is a bill that essentially when you buy a home, there would be a rating the way that there is when you buy like a dishwasher. It would basically tell you how energy efficient that home is. And there's a little bit of language in there about how energy efficiency money is used. So that really needs to be fixed. But otherwise, it seems like a great idea. I'm not positive, honestly, that it can get over the finish line because real estate agents oppose it very vigorously. And it's they're a pretty powerful voice because there are lots of them in every town. And they tend to be pretty vocal about this in particular. So Don said that this was an excellent overview. Thank you, Don. Do we have any other questions about this particular set of legislation? Or, you know, as Carol asked, are there any other pieces of legislation that folks are curious about? I may not be able to answer questions about other pieces of legislation, but I'm definitely willing to say what I know. All right, so I'm going to say then that everybody, I'm going to guess that you guys are good and that you're ready to make calls. And again, I just want to reiterate Henrietta's point that you guys are the most powerful voices to your rep and senator. They really care the absolute most about people who are in their communities, and getting a call from you can make the difference between them moving on this legislation or not moving on this legislation. So everybody go out there and make your calls and let us know how it goes. Have a great evening, and we will talk to you guys soon. Thanks.